So hey guys, today we're talking about the Mulcharmy cards. So honestly, these cards are kind of ass, especially in comparison to actually just Max E. So the only benefit I think to the Mulcharmies is I guess you can resolve Mulcharmy Purlia and then activate Mulcharmy Purlia. And if we do so, only one of these will be negated. So we're going to assume like chain 1 Purlia, chain 2 called by, chain 3 Purlia again. Then, if your opponent specifically summons from the hand 2 times, you essentially have done the equivalent of an upstart goblin. If your opponent summons 3 times, it's Pot of Greed, which is honestly not much, considering we do actually somewhat have Pot of Greed cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. Like, I don't know. We could simply just activate like Triple Tactics Talents, and that's pretty much guaranteed to resolve if you have like, I don't know, like 5-6 cards in hand, and your opponent has like some sort of end board, probably will resolve one way or another. So yeah, I would argue that would be a little bit better than what happens in this case. And of course, in Master Duel, this is best of one, so you can't like side deck in or out your Mulcharmies. You kind of have to hard commit. And the issue with the Mulcharmies, aside from being just essentially an inferior Maxi, is their decks. Well, we only have these two Mulcharmies as of currently. We have Fuelos and we have the Perulia. But the thing is that they're unironically decks that can play around both Mulcharmies and give your opponent a total of what we call 0 draws. So this is pretty easy to do. So all you have to do is play Centurion. And it's not going to necessarily be like every single hand is going to be able to play through like all of the Mulcharmies or whatever, but the fact that you can mostly do it, right, without too much issue is pretty absurd in its own way. So in particular, the two Mulcharmies we have as of currently, and I believe there's like a third one that we might not have, that I think does every time your opponent special summons from the graveyard and some other location, maybe. I think there's a trigger to draw on that. With Mulcharmy Purlia specifically. This is every time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from the hand, right? So what Centurions can do is, if you have either Stand-Up Centurion or we have Emblema Oath, this is going to go ahead and activate the effect to place a Centurion. So if we do place Trudea, special summon Trudea, place Chimera, and we grab Stand-Up Centurion, activate that. We might activate Stand-Up Centurion effect, it kind of depends, right? But in general, the entirety of all of those actions, they have done literally nothing, and we can also make Legadia, and then it just becomes an upstart, and you essentially go net 0. The card accomplishes literally nothing here in this case. So we can either upstart or go neg 1 against Centurion immediately. And, you know, if your hand is essentially like a full house and we have 3 Perulias and then 2 Fuelos, isn't it crazy that not a single one of these cards do anything, because we're putting cards onto the field and then special summoning them? There's no Mulcharmy for special summon from the spell and trap zone or something like that. Only from extra deck, the graveyard, the hand, whatever, the deck. This summons from none of those locations, so therefore no draw. I mean, when we do one of these quote-unquote, like, we'll just call them prohibited actions for the time being, it only becomes an upstart because we only do it once. So, you know, for example, with Perulia, each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from the hand. So if you activate Perulia twice and I normal summon once, it's just still overall just an upstart. So yeah, it's really doing a whole lot of nothing. But you also have to activate Perulia before I do a normal summon. So, you know, if I open Stand-Up Centurion, I can be just like, double Perulia A, I'll just put Trude in the back row. Then I'll go ahead and set Primera, and then this is only from and then I'll full combo essentially go Auxilla and then pass, and that's it. This really isn't doing a whole lot. And then if we get hit by this instead, we can just go ahead and make Legadia next turn, or we can allow you to go even and go into Auxilla. I mean, either way is fine, right? And that's just one example, like the most extreme example. And also, of course, we have this just similar plays like this if we have to deal with like a Maxi, if we even care, right? Otherwise, we can just make Legadia anyways, and then you draw like twice. Or not Legadia, Auxilla. Yeah. So overall, not netting a whole lot of advantage against Centurion here. And Centurion will get support in the future. I'm not sure like how good the support is or exactly what it does, or if it plays around this as well, but yeah, it's just not looking so useful immediately. And this is before considering things like how many copies of Perulia, Fulos, Maxi you're running together, and how you still have room for like hand traps, engine, or whatever to try to stop your opponent from whatever their game plan is. And how because you're running, for example, if I run 3 copies of Maxi and then we run 2 copies of either Perulia or Fulos, then I have less room for non-engine. Like, whether I run 2 or 3 of these Mulcharmies, they could have been like Ash Blossom Joy Springs instead, or like Ghost Ogre, just whatever hand trap instead of this. And if we had maybe, for example, infinite impermanence, we could have impermed on like a number of different things to stop Centurion. But if we have like these draw cards that they don't even draw, that completely useless against Centurion. For example, one other such deck is probably just going to be Drytron. So the thing about Drytron is, well, ritual deck. You don't necessarily need to special summon from the extra deck. And also, you don't summon from the deck either with this deck, like, unless you activate, I guess, Drytron Nova, which is the only time this happens. So overall, Upstart, if we do this, and then with Mulcharmy Perulia, well, it is entirely possible for Drytron to just never special summon from hand. So for our ritual summons, we can actually ritual summon guys from the graveyard with Meteonis Drytron, as we can see here. This can be used to ritual summon any ritual monster from your hand or graveyard. So we could send Herald to the graveyard at some point via like adding it to hand, tributing it, and then ritual summoning it, for example. And then, yeah, it was never really in the hand, was it? And then there's also the fact that the Drytrons here will tribute another guy and then special summon themselves from the graveyard. So then we have the guy that we tributed, in which case, like, if it's another Drytron, like if we have Alpha tribute Zeta, then then Zeta can tribute Alpha and then summon from the graveyard as well. So these guys won't even be summoned from the graveyard or deck. This will be directly just from the graveyard. So yeah, not doing a whole lot in this department. And yeah, Maxi would be able to, like, I guess somewhat cuck Drytron, because, you know, these are actually special summons, and Drytron does special summon a lot, but it doesn't it doesn't need to special summon from either the hand, nor do you need to special summon from the deck here. So that plays around Mulcharmies as well. And then there are decks that can essentially just play on your opponent's turn, like optionally. So if we had Tearlaments at the full, well, at essentially full power, well, I'm going to be thinking in my head like the full power we achieved in Master Duel, whatever that was. So with all of those Ishizu Millers and whatnot, yeah, we can just make Kikelos, and then we can just pass, you know, and just add Soliac effect, target Kalos, negate your guy, and then we just make Rukalos and stuff on your turn. Also Shufflers. So yeah, that's not going to really help you here. It's just purely like upstarts, and they're much more available. Like anti Mulcharmy lines, I believe, are a lot more viable and easier to find than straight up anti-Maxi lines, in which case the Tearlament one was also an anti-Maxi line, but yeah, these Mulcharmies are not seeing a lot of mileage right now. I mean, there might come a time, like, if there was like a tier 0 deck that did do this action and had no way to play around needing to special summon a certain amount of times, then maybe we can talk about the Mulcharmies. Like, maybe they'll actually be kind of worthwhile at that point, but as things are currently, I just don't really see any mileage from the Mulcharmies. But you know, if you did care, technically with the current Mulcharmies we have Drytron and Centurion and probably Voiceless Voice are pretty solid options, just if you really hate Maxi Mulcharmies and whatnot. All of those archetypes, and there's probably a few others as well. There are probably a good few decks actually that just can play around Mulcharmies with no real issue. But yeah, all of those decks should be able to just more or less ignore the fact that your opponent is resolving Mulcharmies at all. So you don't even have to worry about like, I didn't open Ash Blossom for Fulos or whatever. You just shouldn't really care. It shouldn't really be bothering you too much. In terms of Fulos, the main thing that's kind of annoying that does is it special summons per summon from extra deck, but you know, just having very minimal summons from the extra deck sometimes not really that big of a deal. Like for example with Unchained, there's essentially the only anti-Maxi line you have is when we resolve either Aruha or Rakea, pop back row, special summon, and then we summon probably Sharvara, link off, or Unchained Soul of Rage. That's about the best you can do. This is an upstart against Fulos. Yeah, right? Each time your opponent... No, it's not an upstart, it's Pot of Greed. You draw 1, actually, from the special summon from the deck. And then, yeah, it's still pretty much just as bad as Maxi, almost, but it's 1 less draw if you use Aruha, I guess. So it's consistently at 2 summons. So, yeah, something like an Unchained you're suffering just a little bit. Just up here, Pot of Greed is still almost acceptable because you have like, well, for your end board it's 7 interactions total if you're able to full combo. But I mean that's going to be a few more draws then, I guess. I think you special summon from the extra deck 3 times for this, but you special summon from the main deck quite a few times. But yeah, if we were to not special summon from the main deck that many times and just maybe from hand, for example, there are decks that can summon from deck or hand, like for example Dark World actually surprisingly just doesn't care if we're focusing on just the Dark World cards alone. The Dark World cards might not care, but the danger ones do, I guess, which is like, it's certainly something. I mean, it's not that bad, honestly, but with a Dark World, I mean, you technically do have deck out as a win con, so kind of awkward there, but with the Mulcharmies in particular, you special summon like, I guess it's kind of well known that you special summon like a billion times in Dark World and then you do something like relatively unfair. That's kind of how the deck functions, but yeah, all these guys actually special summon from the graveyard. So you need the Dark World guys in hand and then you discard them and they special summon from graveyard. So despite special summoning like a billion times, yeah, your opponent just can't do anything about these with the Mulcharmies. As of currently, there are no Mulcharmies that get any draws from graveyard summon, so kind of unfortunate. I would argue this is a negative for Dark World players because, you know, if you were drawing off of the Mulcharmies more, it would make the deck out a bit easier. So that's just a small negative here, because they're actually special summoning and all resolving in the graveyard. and notably, like, dangers are very hard to do anything about with hand traps. So, well, with the exception of maybe something like a Duel and Lockbird. So, what are you going to do? Like, BD Crow my Danger Nessie, or are you going to like try Ash Blossom Joe Spring on it? I mean, Ash Blossom Joe Spring on the Graveyard effect is like kind of annoying situationally, but it just doesn't trade that favorably. Just in general, like most hand traps. In fact, there are a lot of hand traps that just can't be used, period, like Ghost Ogre, because of where these guys are resolving, mostly in the graveyard or in the hand. So yeah, it's doing quite a lot of nothing. And right now, as of currently, I'm pretty sure people were mostly just testing the Mulcharmies out. My expectation is that the Mulcharmies are just going to be removed from the deck as of currently, because there's really no reason to be playing these. I mean, Maxi is sufficient, and if you consider your deck ratios and whatnot, it just genuinely doesn't make sense to run the Mulcharmies. And there actually is a negative with the Mulcharmies just in general. So if we grab back Fuelos here, if we combine Fuelos with Maxi, you're actually screwing over your Maxi a bit with your Mulcharmy Fuelos. So the effect here says, once per turn, or no, once during the end phase, if the number of cards in your hand is more than the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6, you must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck, so the number in your hand equals the number your opponent controls plus 6. So let's say I am playing, I don't know, we'll go with Blackwing, right? Blackwing ends on like a lot of guys. So let's say I end on maybe 7 cards, and you drew like, let's say 20 cards. Then you have to do well, let's assume you resolve both your Mulcharmies, like 2 Fuelos plus Maxi. Well, now you have to put back cards until your hand equals the amount I have plus 6. So if I have, what number did I say? I forget. So we'll go with 7. So 7 plus 6, that would be 13 cards. You have 13 cards in hand, but I might have summoned like 20, 30 times to the point where you close the deck out, for example. And I mean, actually, Blackwing doesn't actually special summon as many times as that. I think it special summons like maybe 10 or 12 times. I don't remember. It's actually not as much as you would think. Well, yeah. It's not even close to enough to deck out, but if you account for like how many cards you're actually drawing, you're drawing off of the Fuelos, off of every summon. So maybe I special summon from the extra deck 5 times, and you started with like 2 Mulcharmies plus Maxi maybe. Then you're drawing 3 times for every time I summon from the extra deck. So if we only account for the extra deck summons, let's say I summon 5 times, you're going to get 15 draws. But then at this point, you will also have to account for the cards you have in your starting hand. So in this case, we have 2 cards and 15 cards, so we would have to put back 5 cards already. And then if we account for like the fact that for every single extra deck summon, for the most part, you need to summon 2 guys, that's going to be like closer to already like, I don't know, like 20, 25, 30 cards or something like that, right? But then you're going to have to put back more and more cards depending on like if you resolve the Mulcharmies or not, right? So if you use the Mulcharmy, let's say we have 30 cards in hand, then we have to do a bit of math, 30, and then minus, well, in this case it's 13. This is the difference. So the difference between this is 17, so you would have to put back 17 cards, which is like not great. I mean, you can still keep like technically 13 of the best cards, but unironically 13 cards, depending on exactly what you have in your deck list. Like if you don't have certain board breakers, like Super Poly, for example, you're just going to lose to Blackwing, right? Because you have hand traps that are in archetype, and you have like Sharnga in the graveyard, and also you have to out Blackwing Full Armor Master, and also there's protection effects actually with some of the back row. that protect your whole field, and then there's also the burn effect, so you're limited in how many monster effects you can actually activate. And that can just lead to you getting completely cooked, I guess. So yeah, that factor existed with Max E before, that nothing really changes about that, but now if you resolve Mulcharmies, you also have less cards to work with overall to begin with, less options and stuff. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.